just excited to be here tonight. There we go. We have for you the amazing Joe Kirk. He is the brand curator for Grand Seiko, but in my opinion, he is the person who knows the most about Grand Seiko in the entire universe. So we're so honored to have him here.
Thank you. It's always a pleasure to be back. I'm sorry I couldn't make it last year. I was just telling Monica, I was like, I don't even know how much time I actually spent at home last year because of all the travel, but it's been a lot of fun, and it's always such a pleasure to come back to Denver and party with you guys. So thank you for having me and our team, of course. Tonight, I just want to kind of talk about the brand a little bit. You know, I've done so many presentations here. There's always so many different topics. And one I think that's kind of cool that we don't really touch on very often is Japanese sensibilities. And so, you know, a couple of kind of words that may be used in Japanese culture that you can actually see the influence in our brand. And the first word that I wanted to throw on the table is the concept of wa. And wa is really to be in harmony, right? To understand. And for us, it's not just about, you know, obviously we are a brand that is very in harmony with nature, right? That is a big part of the DNA of Grand Seiko. But when you look at our brand, it was founded in 1960 on the basic principle to be the best everyday wristwatch that it could possibly be, right? 1960, you needed a wristwatch. What did you need in your everyday life? And so to be in harmony, to have that sense of wa, you need precision. If it's a precise watch, it should be legible. And in order to have a precise and legible watch, it needs to be durable. And no one wants to buy, I always say this, no one wants to buy an ugly watch. Many people do, myself included. Beauty is in the eye of the beholder, right? But for us, you know, we do rely on this very distinct sense of Japanese aesthetic, right? So, and I'll talk a little bit about that as well. But these four guiding principles or these brand values are what make Grand Seiko what it was. And that is entirely what the concept was when it was launched in 1960. So this is the first Grand Seiko. It is a very simple watch, but it did the best job. And it was the first Japanese watch to follow the designation of chronometer. Not only that, but the superior grade of chronometer at the time. And this is, you know, plus 12 to minus 3 seconds a day back in these days. And it only took us 6 years before we decided that's not good enough. We want to be better than what is recognized as the global standard. So we introduced our Grand Seiko standard 6 years later as the foundation of Grand Seiko's precision, right? So since 1966, every Grand Seiko watch that we've made has been more accurate than the global standard of chronometer. First 50 years of Grand Seiko's existence were isolated to the Japanese market. So if you heard about Grand Seiko somehow, if you wanted one, you had to go to Japan to get it. And it wasn't until 2010 that Mr. Hattori, the great-grandson of the founder of the company, went to Basel World at the time and stated, Grand Seiko is becoming a global brand. And we've talked a lot about it. This is a very special year for us as well. Grand Seiko also is going to be distributing a small brand called Credor, which we have some examples here for you to see today. But this is the inaugural year of Credor becoming a global brand, though don't expect to see them in stores anytime soon because everything we get goes away very quickly. So, but it's a good step into the light and showing good signs for the future. So 2010, Grand Seiko became a global brand, and when you looked at Grand Seiko back in the day, it had Seiko Grand Seiko, which is kind of silly. It's a little redundant, you know, to have the same name brand on it twice. But at that time, you know, Seiko was such a big name brand, so trusted and reliable, that it made sense to see the Seiko logo as the prominent logo. But it didn't make sense because it was a completely separate brand in how it's made, how it's distributed, and that was what we really wanted to kind of focus on. So from 2010, jump forward 7 years, we got rid of Seiko at the top of the dial. It's no longer redundant, and we call it very proudly just Grand Seiko, no longer Seiko Grand Seiko. And this independence was exactly what I said. It meant changes in leadership, it meant changes in distribution, it meant changes in marketing, and we also changed the dial. And something about that resonated with people, right? It also brought us back to our roots, because if you saw that first Grand Seiko, it only had Grand Seiko on the dial. So at this time, we saw tremendous growth. I mean, we're talking an insane amount of growth in a very short period of time of 1 year, from changing the Seiko dial to Grand Seiko. But it caught people's attention, and it's been one of the fastest growing brands in the luxury watch industry today. So we're very proud of it. Right? In Japan, it's one of the top luxury brands, which is really, it's remarkable. You see Grand Seiko everywhere, and that strength we hope to see, one day here in the U.S. But obviously, we need some more time to grow. We also need to figure out how to increase our production. But that's a whole nother story for another day. So one of the other elements that derives from Buddhism, shizen, is another term that I think really connects with our brand. It's talking about nature, and not only nature as in like mountains and rivers, trees, things of that nature, flowers, of course, but also nature as a state of being. And when you look at our brand philosophy is the nature of time. And the use of the words nature and time are in that same vein as the term shizen. So this is our connection, our cultural connection to Japan reflected in our brand, even though we're not using these buzzwords, these keywords that I'm presenting today are not marketing material. This was not given to me by someone. These are just things that you pick up on over time. But it's very much a cultural thing, and I think that's very cool that we respect the Japanese culture in so many different ways, and we're not necessarily boasting about it either. So I also wanted to make this presentation special because I've given so many here, and this is something a little different and a little unique. So, but the nature of time, I always call back to, people think that these nature themes for our dial are just kind of, gimmicky maybe, or, something along those lines. Totally not the case. In Japan, the earliest timekeepers were utilizing nature in order to measure the time. And also, you can think about things like sundials, water clocks, all these various different elemental tools, we'll say, to measure time. But the concept of timekeeping in Japan before the Western clock was brought there was using a seasonal clock that shifted its hours, the duration of hours in the day, depending on the season. So we were using the seasons to determine the time. Even long before, a 12 or let's say a 24-hour, 60-minute, 60-second controlled Western clock was introduced into the Japanese market. So this concept of nature and time is very deeply rooted in Japanese culture, and this is one of the reasons why it is a very proud part of Grand Seiko's philosophy. So with that said, you can look at our brand, you see this, feel the nature of Grand Seiko. You can kind of get the sense, right? I was talking to some of the group earlier tonight about a concept called mitate. Mitate, another buzzword, I don't have the slide for it, but I will throw out there. Mitate is kind of how we conceive the dial concepts, right? It's mitate is like to see something that is maybe not a direct translation, but is evoked. And so we don't want to give you a dial that literally looks like cherry blossoms. We actually use a pattern we call iwao internally. And iwao is rock. So the base of the dial texture is actually based on rock, not cherry blossom petals. But this very fine texture, which is carved by hand into a mold and then pressed into the dial, gives the sense of cherry blossoms as they float on the water surface. This is called Hana Ikada. And this is the base concept behind our most popular model, SBGA 413, otherwise known as Shunbun, or many call it just simply cherry blossoms. So not just using that base pattern, but also silver plating and a very faint pink lacquer to give it that very subtle but very silvery pink accent. So it's not too in your face, very subtle, subdued, and deeply rooted in the nature of the sakura or the cherry blossoms themselves. We have the white birch, one of my favorites. This is a very prominent texture. It's made to evoke a white birch forest, right? Don't be confused with the birch bark, which is made to look like the bark of the actual tree up close, a singular tree, where this is made to look like many trees in the forest. And this is, again, evoking that, but not a literal translation. And this dial has so many steps and producing that it would be an hour presentation on itself, but it is a very remarkable dial, has a tremendous sense of depth, and again, a great deep connection to nature. And the other thing is that this giant birch forest is right near our studio in Shizuku-ishi, so that helps too. And then our latest and greatest dial, the Ice Forest, which gives this impression of the tree peaks of the frozen trees in Nagano Prefecture, as you can see here. So the designers are amazing. They go in, they draw a little picture of a tree, and then they break it down, right? Take away, remove as much as possible to make it that much better, right? Simplify. And from there, they can create this amazing dial texture that, while it has some similarity, if you look under a microscope or a loop, you'll notice some similarity to the texture of the Shunbun, or the cherry blossoms model. However, it's a little bit more organized. It's a little bit more shaped, right? And a little bit more repetitive in nature. And not only are we evoking this crystalline forest of ice trees, but at the same time, it somewhat pays tribute to the crystalline structure of ice itself. So there's a lot of really unique elements within these dials. I could go on for days about our many, many dials, but these are some of the most iconic, I'd say, right now in the Grand Seiko assortment. So the other thing that I think is most prominent about our brand is our connection to the hometowns, right? We call the soul places of Grand Seiko. So Nagano Prefecture in a city called Shiojiri. This is also known as Shinshu. And Shinshu is the birthplace of Grand Seiko, right? This is a very important place for us because that's where Grand Seiko was born. Today, it is also, the birthplace of Spring Drive. So Spring Drive was born there also. And so in our Shinshu watch studio, we're responsible for creating all of our Spring Drive models, all of our 9F quartz models. This is also the manufacturer that was responsible for launching the first quartz wristwatch in the world in 1969. So there's a lot of really, unique developments that occurred in this unique studio, which has evolved over the years. It's not, it used to be known as Suwa Seikosha, is now our Shinshu watch studio within Seiko Epson Corporation. And so headed north of Tokyo, you have in the capital city of Morioka, right nearby, I should say, in a small town neighboring, is the town of Shizuku-ishi. Shizuku-ishi is where we make all mechanical Grand Seiko. And originally, let's say the roots of this factory were in Tokyo, in Komedo district in Tokyo, and they relocated in 1970, and so now this is the hometown since 1970 of Grand Seiko mechanical watchmaking. So this is where we make the white birch, all of our high beat movements as an example, our classic automatic GMT with that beautiful ivory dial and blue GMT hand, and also where we have our most innovative escapement that we find in the white birch, the dual impulse escapement, also made in the studio. So tremendous innovation in both locations, and they all pay tribute to the hometowns, right, in some way, shape, or form. And then in Tokyo, we haven't made watches there in a long time, up until 2022, when we opened what we call Atelier Ginza. And Atelier Ginza is responsible for making one type of watch, and it's the most expensive Grand Seiko by a long shot at about $400,000, called Kodo. So these manufacturer and soul places, you'll see the representation of the Hotaka and Jonen mountain range that surround our Shinshu watch studio. You'll see Mount Iwate that represents the northern manufacturer in Iwate Prefecture. These are the kind of subtle tributes to the hometowns and birthplaces of Grand Seiko that I think make our brand so distinct and unique. Now, what makes our brand so special overall are the people behind it. And this term, takumi, we actually do use in our marketing material and our communication. And takumi is essentially an artisan, right? These are the craftsmen, women, the designers, the whole team that's responsible for bringing Grand Seiko to life. It is an immense project to bring a watch to life from concept to final product, especially ones that are $400,000. That was a 10-year journey. Spring Drive, nearly 30 years to go from concept to continuous production. It's a very, very big job, and there are many different facets and many different angles, right? You have movement development, you have case development, which we're always challenging ourselves. You have dial development, because we want to do something better than the last. So there's a huge task at hand, and how are we going to continuously improve? That's the question at the end of the day. And then coming into the Japanese sense of aesthetic. So this is a concept that has been revered in Japan for a long time. There's a great book about it called In Praise of Shadows, if you're ever bored and want to read something very interesting. There's some very interesting articles in there, or let's say topics in there that you would never think would influence design in such an impactful way. But at the end of the day, this concept of light and shadow, not just the two, complete contrasts, but every gradation in between, and utilizing them to create new impressions, right? When you look at our watches, you can see every angle. Even if it's a flat picture, you can tell every angle in our watch because of the way we design it. All these different flat surfaces, sharp edges, and intersecting planes create this very three-dimensional geometric, shape that even when you look at the case sides, like the profile like this, right? Beautiful from every angle, and that is necessary to create this dramatic interplay of light and shadow. One surface will reflect light, the other will cast shadow, and it keeps it very interchangeable and very interesting, just always aesthetically pleasing. So this is a unique element, not only utilized on our cases, but if you look at the hands and markers, they are so heavily faceted, especially in our Evolution 9 collection, like the White Birch and the UFA, the Ice Forest. These models have such highly faceted and grooved indices, and the whole concept is based on a diamond, right? The more facets, the more perfectly polished it is, the more it reflects light. And we wanted, this is going back to the 1960s. If you went into our Wako department store, which sold many different brands of watches at the time and still does today, and you saw all these different brands, we wanted Grand Seiko to stand out and shimmer like a diamond. That was our goal. And that's what we've done with this brand, and it is all thanks to Zaratsu polishing. Right. Zaratsu polishing is used exclusively for our cases. We don't do it on the hands and the indices. Too small, we do diamond cut surfaces for those. But the concept is the same, and we utilize these alternating brushed and mirror polished finishes to create an even better sense of depth. But the beauty of Zaratsu polishing is that you're basically taking a spinning metal disc, and you're taking the case just like this, and you're grinding it up against the surface of this other metal disc with an abrasive in between. And you're grinding every surface. Typically, you're just buffing the case with a soft cotton type wheel, and unfortunately when you do that, this sharp edge right here all of a sudden gets round, because you're really trying to make it shiny, but you're dulling this edge at the same time. So we utilize Zaratsu not only to create this beautiful distortion-free mirror finish, because we can make it perfectly flat, but also when you have two surfaces polished in that same way and they intersect, you get this perfectly crisp edge. And we don't lose the beauty of that crispness in the polishing process. So that's, I think, one of the most hidden uniquenesses of Zaratsu is actually forming the case shape. So I mentioned the term Takumi, the spirit of Takumi, right? This assembly, the Zaratsu, all of these things that go into Grand Seiko create this unique spirit, let's say, that comes from the craftsmen and women responsible for putting these watches together. And that is really what makes Grand Seiko so distinct, right? The hands, the people behind it are what make it very special. And, in this price range, it can be hard to find a lot of hand craftsmanship, but we find so many ways to incorporate it and also do it on a scale where we can, provide continuous production and keep customers happy with the consistency as well. So all of these things are very important, and it's really about the people behind it. So basically, I've given you the two overarching concepts within our brand: inspired by nature and mastered by Takumi. So these two elements are what really make Grand Seiko what it is today. So the last topic I wanted to kind of, maybe second to last, but one of the most important, I would say, is the concept of kaizen. Kaizen is this relentless pursuit of perfection. That is what Grand Seiko was built on, right? From the first Grand Seiko to today, all we're doing is trying to improve. right? Year on year, we're trying to do better. And every product that we release, if there is a higher price, there is a reason. We put more work into it. And that is, I think sometimes hard for people to understand, that we just want to do better. We still make watches that are amazing in the $2,700 starting price range, right? That hard to believe by today's standard that Grand Seiko is still doing that, especially when most of the watches that we sell are in probably closer to the $7,000 average price. But we have this amazing variety, and we're trying to showcase our skill. And some of the uniqueness in kaizen allows us to diversify our brand a whole lot more now. So we are a completely vertically integrated manufacturer, which means not only do we make the parts, but we do all the research, design, and development. So the student under the master has to figure out a way to do better than their master did, right? That is the relentless nature that you see in this R&D aspect, right? Then you have the manufacturing and production, whether you're talking about the quality of the components or the way we actually make something, how are we going to improve? Then you have the assembly and adjustment, always trying to do better than our predecessor, right? We're handing down that information, but we're trying to improve. We're trying to do it better. So this is always, it's a revolving door essentially. And in Japan, there is this very, strong mentality that you stick with your job. When you start, you're a lifer, and that is not a common trait, especially here in the States, but also in Switzerland. So, I think that we have a unique element in that regard as well. And then, when it comes to the actual quality control, inspections, testings, we actually make a lot of the machinery and things like that in-house to test our watches. So how are we going to continuously improve in that regard as well? So we have our 3 movement types. We make quartz because it's practical, it's easy to use, and it's always accurate and ready, right? It runs for 3 years, not 3 days, so it has a lot of merit. It's also a great price point and beautifully finished. As you can see in this picture, this is how they actually look, all made of metal and intended to be handed down generation to generation. We make mechanical watches still because that's a part of our history and heritage, and we need to keep passing that knowledge down. Otherwise, it's going to get lost. Spring drive is a unique animal. That is a monster, and it is our best-selling movement type, and it took us, like I said, 27 years to get it into continuous production, but it is really a unique machine in the watch industry. So we've done everything from these crazy complications like this constant force tourbillon I was talking about earlier to achieve high precision, right? 400,000 for high precision, and then the groundbreaking innovation of the dual impulse escapement, one of the very few unique escapements in the watch industry. This is a groundbreaking development, and it is in a $10,000 price range. That, to me, that's one of the most significant watches that we've ever made, is anything with 9S A series or 9SC, Tentograph, our birch bark, our white birch, all of those. This is true innovation. And not only do we have this unique escapement that is very energy efficient, that's its primary goal, but we also developed an easy way to adjust it despite the fact that it has an overcoil and is free sprung. So we developed our own patented free sprung balance with a unique overcoil that we determined after analyzing 80,000 different shapes of overcoil, thankfully using computer data and not manual like the old days. But we were able to determine out of those 80,000 shape, we narrow it down to 10,000, we narrow it down more and more and more, and now all you have to do, you have the little screws on the balance wheel to adjust the rate, but you could never adjust the isochronism before unless you pulled it off and manually kinked the shape of the hairspring. Right? That's a hard and labor-intensive process. Now all you do is turn a little screw at the end of the hairspring and you can adjust it. So thanks to all that R&D, again, another decade invested in developing this. And then we have the one and only spring drive, right? The power of the mainspring is the sole driving force. It attains accuracy within quartz level, and it used to be, seconds per month. Now we're talking seconds per year with our new UFA that we launched this year. Ultra fine accuracy, that is a huge breakthrough. I didn't think it would happen in my lifetime. So very, very honored to be wearing that today and showcase it here for you as well, because I think this is the foundation for the future of Grand Seiko. So the UFA is very important to us. right? That's the idea behind it, is we want to make a great long-lasting watch. That's the idea of a practical everyday watch. So in that, I'm going to show you one of the most expensive ones that we make, and we have a sample here for you to see today, along with the Creator HE2, is the 8-day Power Reserve Grand Seiko, which is a part of our Masterpiece collection. These are such small production. You cannot fathom how small production is coming out of our micro artist studio, but it is almost nothing. And you know, the watch still looks simple. It's still very Grand Seiko, but it has a lot going on. And my favorite is on the back side of the movement. I was sharing with some of the guests tonight. When you look at the movement, which is all hand finished using hand files, emery boards, and sticks of wood with diamond paste, right? You have all this work that goes into over 300 components in this movement that just tells time. You have the depiction of Mount Fuji for the beveled edge, with the glide wheel representing the location of the rising sun. At the bottom, under the word days, you see this little hand engraved logo. That's our location of our micro artist studio in Shiojiri. So if you were in, let's say, or nearby our studio, off in the distance on a clear day, you might see Mount Fuji with the rising sun. Off to the right, you would see Lake Suwa, which you may know from our very famous Lake Suwa dials. And then the city lights of the city of Suwa are the jewels and the blued screws. So this is a little map of Nagano in case you get lost and you want to find your way to Mount Fuji or the micro artist studio. So, amazing watch. Definitely check it out while you have the chance. And that's the end of my, my spiel for the night.